So do you have principles or things that people can keep in mind to try to improve their ability to communicate digitally right now?
Yeah, I do. This relates a little bit to you. So you said, I got in the presidential race because I'm looking around me and there's a lot of huge problems. And I feel like I should try to fix some of these problems. It's an exaggeration to say I got into communications training for the same reason, but it's kind of like that. In other words, there is a lot of really terrible coaching out there that people get. And what I mean by that is not like that they go take a class somewhere. There's a lot of received ideas about how you should be better as a communicator. And it tends to fall into two things. One is something called thought suppression. And number two is tremendously reductive coaching. So thought suppression sounds like this. Don't be nervous, Andrew, just be yourself. Okay, so that's thought suppression coaching. You're welcome for that, by the way. That's great, I know. Number two is like, when you speak, make sure you speak in the lower third of your voice and make broad, commanding gestures to emphasize key points.
Where were these instructions when I needed them, Michael?
Exactly,
I'm kidding.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Don't be nervous and speak low and gesture big. Damn it, I could have been president if you had just clued me in.
You know what's frightening? That kind of feedback happens at the highest levels too. It absolutely does. And it's part of why you see people making the same gesture over and over again, or speaking in this very reductive manner all the time to try to emphasize key points no matter what they're talking about. So people get this really reductive coaching. And the thought suppression is even worse, actually, because the thought suppression, like just as I told you, don't be nervous. As soon as I say that, your brain goes right to thought suppression, which is like, don't do this thing. Your brain's obligated to look at the thing because it's looking at that thing. Now it's thinking about that thing and how bad you are at not doing that thing. And of course, people get kind of paralyzed in that. So my goal is always to try to get them out of thought suppression and reductive coaching and try to unlock what they do really, really well when they are, back to that point, other focused as opposed to totally self-focused. People think about like their presentation or their presence as being something that's all about them. And so they think like, when I'm comfortable, I come across well. And when I'm uncomfortable, I don't. And the funny thing is that for almost everyone, you come across the best when you're actually trying to communicate something to someone else. I mean, legitimately other focused. So as an example, like let's say a friend comes to you and the friend is in a crisis and you start talking to the friend and you hear what's happening to them. I promise you, like right away, your eye contact improves. Right away, you begin to speak in very technical language if that's needed, or very, very colloquial and casual language if that's needed. Right away, you slow down your rate of speech if the person's having a hard time digesting what you're sharing. You do all that automatically and you never think about like my presentation skills. You just do it because you're using all of yourself to try to reach the other person. Now, what happens in this format is that, I mean, for a bunch of reasons, one of which is you have a little floating box of your video right there that you're staring at part of the time of like, what are my hands doing? What is my face doing? It's very hard not to feel self-conscious the entire time and be thinking about my communication skills. But what you want to do is unlock what people do when they're actually very focused on the other person. And the strange thing is right now, even as weird as that camera feels, this is the vehicle that people have to reach everybody, friends, family, an employer, anyone. This is the vehicle we have. So helping people unlock that idea of other focus, even when they can't help but be a little bit self-focused, is really important.
Oh, so it's caring about what the other person is getting as opposed to what you are doing at any moment in time. So we have a couple of things that are out there in the world that are not great pieces of advice for folks. So what's the good stuff?
So like if you're asking about principles, a couple things immediately. One, you alluded to this, which is that people totally underestimate how deeply physical spoken communications are. So people think like, if I've done my homework, if I've prepared my PowerPoint slides, if I've prepped for the interview, if I've gone over the questions I might get asked, I'm going to do great. And it's not true. I mean, think about how many like scientists or subject matter experts there are who are phenomenal in terms of what they know, but they can't actually communicate it very well at all. So the point is that when you put words into language, this remarkable coordination happens where your diaphragm drops down, your lungs fill with air. That air then flows over your vocal cords. They vibrate. They actually move in space. They make some sound. The sound amplifies throughout your whole body, and then your mouth and your tongue and your lips and your throat and your jaw, they all work together to shape that raw sound into words that can be understood. So it's much, much closer to a sport than it is any kind of mental exercise. It's part of the reason why we would always warm up. We put so much focus on the campaign of like getting yourself physically and vocally primed to communicate. So the biggest principle that people mess up all the time is they think it's all about what's up here, and so much of it has to do with what's happening down here. And you can actually prepare that. And the reason that's so liberating is because that you can actually control. You can't control what question you're going to get from the interviewer. You can't. But you can control how you've prepared yourself physically and vocally to take that question and hopefully hit it out of the park.
So what would those preparation activities look like for someone pre-job interview?
Yeah. So that's another big thing to apply it to, which is this. People are good at something. Whoever's listening to this right now, you're good at something. You're an expert in something. And oftentimes there's some sort of a ritual or regimen you go through with that thing that helps you do that thing well. So for instance, if you're an athlete, warm up physically like an athlete before you begin speaking. If you're a dancer, same thing. If a singer, same thing. But even if you like to do something much more cerebral, like board games, there are still principles that can be applied to speaking that apply one-to-one from that sort of discipline. So one thing I often tell people is like choose something you're already very expert in. Figure out what the principles are of that and apply it to communication. That's kind of vague, but I can get much more specific if you want.
Yeah,
but,
please.
Yeah, sure.
I'm imagining I'm a person, I'm a viewer, and let's say I'm listening to this and I have a job interview tomorrow. And so then I'm like, okay, now thanks to Michael, like I'm going to approach this like a little bit more of a physical activity. And then instead of cramming notes into my head right before the interview, I'm going to do this instead.
Well, what you would do this instead is you would get physically and vocally warmed up. You can do tongue twisters, you can do stretches, you can get your body and your breath ready to go. There's a bunch of stuff we can share with your viewers and listeners if you want to in terms of resources and access and stuff like that we can get to. But that's the principle of the idea. Then, as opposed to thinking about everything on the page, grab a cell phone and talk into it and give yourself rhetorical questions. If I were to get asked this question, what would I say? And start recording it if you want to listen back. If you don't want to, even the practice of just saying the stuff out loud helps actually get your body physically ready to go and begins to take those talking points from a bunch of stuff in your head and actually puts it into the real world by speaking it out loud. So one, warm up. Like, two, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're just warming up, actually.
Yeah, warm up, actually. Warm up. Practice actually saying this stuff out loud and do it so that you're priming yourself with a question. Meaning, if I were to put this in the form of a story, it might be. Or if I get this question, what I might say is. So you're actually practicing saying things out loud.
So you know those TV characters where before the big interview, they always are practicing talking into a mirror to like pump themselves up before they go to the interview. So you're saying that actually is wise. Like it's not just like on TV that you see characters doing that. That's actually a good idea.
Yeah. Well, with a caveat, sometimes being in the mirror makes people a bit more self-conscious. So you may want to have that visual feedback. You may not. But putting sound into words is absolutely essential. I mean, a different way to look at the same thing is like, is your 10:30 a.m. phone call better than your 9 a.m. phone call? And for a lot of people, the answer is yeah. And what they've done is they used the interview that was at 9 and 9:15 and 9:30 and 10 a.m. as warm-ups to get to the 10:30. So my point is start early or put the warm-up by yourself early in the day before that. And then actually your body will be physically and vocally primed and ready to go to communicate well.
Wow, that makes a world of sense to just about everyone listening to this. Just try and make every call your 10:30 call, so to speak.
Yeah. But by getting physically and vocally primed.
By doing an hour and a half of something ahead of time so you're not cold.
Well, you know what's cool though? You don't need an hour and a half. Like really 5 minutes will do the trick. 10 minutes is even better. And there's time-tested warm-ups and tongue twisters and exercises you can do. And of course, we'll make that available to anybody on this who listens here. But you can also just Google stuff. But we have a whole series of video warm-ups that we give to clients so they can follow along because it is a little bit different than a sport in that when you're speaking, it's all about this channel right here. So your mouth, your lungs, your windpipe here, and your torso. Now, if you're going to play baseball, of course, it's a lot about your wrists and things like that. Communication is a little bit different that way. So there are specialized warm-ups that you can do that are about how you walk and talk.
I love the mind-body connection aspect.
Yeah. That's like, I think, a bit of an unexplored frontier with this whole thing, which is there's this really powerful thing that unlocks when you get people communicating better is they feel better. And it's not just because they feel better because they said smart stuff. When you're communicating well, in order to do that, you actually have to stand up a little bit more to have room for your diaphragm to drop down and your lungs to fill with air. And you actually have to open your mouth a bit more for the sound to come out. And you actually have to use your body in a more dynamic way. So on a really granular level, you're actually using yourself more like an athlete, and it begins to unlock actually feeling better. You have to breathe more. That oxygen actually helps your life. So people are so focused right now on how sitting is bad, and it is. Sitting as much as we do for, remote existence right now, it's bad.
Is that why you're standing? Is that something you'd recommend for folks?
Yeah, well, two things. So I have a stool too that I can sit on at times because it's not realistic to think that you can stand for 8 hours a day, and you want to be able to go back and forth. But yeah, people should stand for a significant amount of time during the day. They should, if they can.
So if someone has, let's call it a 20-minute job interview, sitting or standing?
I would say standing.
Well, that's a very, very concrete piece of advice. And I have to say that I'm imagining you being interviewed, and it seems like you would be more effective standing because you seem more comfortable and energetic. I know when I was a candidate, if I had a choice between sitting or standing, I always stood because you were just more energetic.
Mm-hmm.
So you described that you have your own space, and it's obviously, in your case, you're doing this all day long. How do you create a good first impression digitally in terms of having a backdrop that seems professional without going overboard?
Sure. Well, people have probably at this point heard a bunch of the basic stuff. You want a light source from the front so your face can be seen. You want a present background so you have a bit of a depth of field. Mine is actually probably busier than you want for an interview or things like that. I do it again because I'm trying to keep folks awake and engaged. And then I can reference things like Fox and Socks if I want them to do tongue twist or something.
You know what has changed my life? I don't know if you have one of these. I'll see if I can show everybody. It's one of these circle lights. That
like those things?
Yeah, like I'll show you all what it looks like. It looks like a UFO now. But
right.
Like this thing has definitely changed everything for me in terms of zooming because you stick it there and then there's always a light on your face. I think it might have cost, I don't know, $30, $40.
Yeah. And then you want to have the camera roughly at eye level, which you're doing a great job of, by the way, right now. Now, that sounds like a few things to remember, right? You're like, 3 things. Okay, what should I do exactly? It's really simple. Just think of it this way. If you were setting a friend up for a good photo when you're traveling, you would do these same things. You would not put the sun like right behind their head. You would not make the background the least attractive part of the scenery. And you would also not shoot them from an unflattering angle like up their nose or something like that. So just do the same exact 3 principles when you're setting yourself up visually for success. We should talk about what to do with interruptions on Zoom. Let's do that for a second.
Yeah, we've all had those Zoom interruptions. So what are the best practices?
Oftentimes the strongest thing you can do when things go wrong, because they're going to go wrong. It's not like an if, it's a when. The strongest thing you can do is actually be transparent in some way. And so because people get interrupted, there's dogs, there's pets, there's tech challenges, people can actually embrace that. And especially if you're talking about hiring someone, that is going to demonstrate a level of in the moment resiliency, in the moment calm, spontaneity that is actually a good thing. So when mistakes happen, people can actually just be transparent about it.
I was trying to make a Marco Rubio joke.
Do Trump or whatever it is.
Like that,
Yeah,
whoever
exactly.
it is.
But you know what's funny though? So just now you take a drink of water, that's transparent, right? You trying to hide the fact that you're taking a drink of water, not so transparent. So that's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Certainly, if you do get interrupted during an interview, as long as you seem confident and have the right spirit, then people will, I think, completely accept it. Like I've had my kids run in all sorts of times, and then sometimes people are like, "Oh, that's cute."
Yeah, I teach 3 Fs for this. It's a little bit like shticky because it's alliterative, but people remember stuff because it's alliterative, so it helps people out. So we teach the idea of fake it or feature it or fix it. And so fake it means like if the kid runs in but no one knows, if the kid's like right here, like, hi, daddy, and they're just doing that thing, you don't have to say like, hey, Michael, my kid's standing right here. You can just fake it. Great. But if the kid steals the attention of the whole thing, you can either feature it or fix it. And feature it means just what you did. Like, hey, my kid's here. Say hello.
So I feel like people will be on their way based upon these principles alone. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.